So this is when the king called out the Philippines, a thank you that changed the world. Now, honestly, I'm excited to see this because the king has said a lot of things about Filipinos, but here he really said something that honestly changed the world. A lot of you guys linked over and said, so I'm really excited to check it out. Please come join me. Let's see this.
No one expected this to happen. Not in the script. Not prepared for. Not part of any media strategy. It was not a political statement, nor a familiar royal social greeting. But when King Charles III stepped up to the microphone, standing before hundreds of world leaders, health leaders, and global media, he stopped. He looked far into the audience. A long silence lingered enough for every eye to rest on him. And then he spoke one sentence, just one, but enough to make the entire room fall silent. Not because his voice was loud, not because of the grand music playing, but because what he said touched the deepest parts of the heart, the Filipino heart. And then, millions of Filipino hearts from London to Manila, from Dubai to Toronto, exploded in emotion.
From all the places they go to.
Not because of a title awarded, not because of a bonus or power, not because they were on television, but because, for the first time in history, they were seen. That day, a king was not just representing an empire. He represented the voice of millions of people who had quietly served humanity nameless. And what he said wrote a new chapter for gratitude. A single sentence that shook the entire hall. When King Charles III stepped up to the podium at the international conference that day, no one expected anything out of the ordinary. Even though he is known for his kindness and standard, he is usually associated with meticulously prepared speeches, full of diplomacy and royal conventions. But this time, something was different. In the brief moment between speeches, he stopped, looked around, then his gaze landed on a group of Filipino guests. He was silent for a few seconds, and then he spoke. The resilience, kindness, and dedication of Filipinos are something the world should learn from. You don't just work with your hands. You work with your heart. One sentence. Just one. But it made the entire hall so used to conventional speeches.
Yo, I don't know how much it's important to emphasize that recognizing people who are quote unquote nameless, right? And people who aren't being recognized, who aren't being seen, how important it is to recognize them and just give that one single moment to let them know that thank you. Just that could do numbers, could do so much for people, could change their lives in a way that, you know, maybe they were really giving up. Maybe something was hitting them at that time or that moment in their life. And when you hit them with something like that, even though to anyone else who's maybe not going through it, doesn't see it as that crazy, just that simple thing can change their lives. Quite literally do numbers, like I said. Like, it does numbers to their heart. It does numbers to their mind. Just that idea of like a thank you. That's important. That's so crucial.
Stand still. There was no immediate applause. No flashing cameras as usual. Only a deep silence, filled with emotion. And then a round of applause erupted, growing louder, truly powerful. Not because it was King Charles, but because someone finally said what needed to be said a long time ago.
Exactly, that's what I'm saying.
At that moment, many Filipinos in the audience were moved to tears. Not because of surprise, but because finally, after years of working quietly, sacrificing in silence,
they were recognized.
They were acknowledged with the most beautiful words possible. Not thank you for your service. Not we appreciate your work. But an affirmation of identity.
Saying that we should learn from it.
You don't just work with your hands.
You work with
you
your
work
heart.
with your heart.
Incredible.
And that wasn't just a compliment. It was a historic declaration when a king acknowledged to the world that the value of Filipino workers is not in their status, titles, or degrees, but in their character, dedication, and unyielding spirit. Since that moment, Those words began to spread across social media platforms, appearing in numerous international articles, shared through messages among overseas Filipinos,
Dude,
because
that's life-changing.
deep in the heart of every Filipino working abroad, there is always a question that has never been answered. Does anyone see me? And that day, the king saw, not with his eyes, but with his heart. The unsung heroes without crowns. They don't wear crowns. They don't sit in parliament. They don't appear in the headlines. But every day, they are present in the most important places: hospital rooms,
Crucial places.
care beds, hospital hallways. And even in unfamiliar homes, they've turned into places of love. They are Filipinos. Long before the king's praise was spoken.
And I think it's important to notice, too, that a lot of the Filipinos who are incredible at their job at nursing and being at nursing homes, I feel like that job is something that has to be admired, because you're constantly seeing people on their, like, last breath, or people on their last foot, right? Like, they're about to go. And a majority of the time, you would assume, like, people who, see that consistently will become numb and just become, without feeling, without, emotion. And, there's nothing wrong with that. Like, I mean, there is, but that's something you have to figure out on your own time. But usually that's what you would expect. But with Filipinos, they keep that soul, they keep that heart, no matter what they see or what they've been through. And I feel like that's another very important thing to learn from. How they see, death and all this happening consistently, especially where they're working and being away from family and seeing people pass and doing all that and still keeping their heart and soul intact all throughout. If that don't tell you something, I don't know what will. But that is incredible. That needs to be noticed too.
We're already there. Silent, patient, no need for the spotlight. Did you know? As of 2024, there are more than 40. Zero Filipinos working in healthcare and
400?
caregiving in the UK. They are nurses, care aides, hospital assistants, home care workers. A few even serve in noble families, including the British royal family. However, what makes them respected is not just their professional skills. It's the way they do their work with all their soul. Ask any patient who has been cared for by a Filipino nurse, and you'll hear words like warm, compassionate, dedicated beyond hours, like family. An elderly woman in Manchester shared, "She didn't just take my blood pressure. She held my hand, sang me to sleep.
Dude.
I don't know how I would gotten through my surgery without her." A man in Liverpool, who just lost his wife to cancer, shared, "It was a Filipino nurse who stayed until the morning just to help me wipe away my tears and hug me as I broke down." In the Philippines,
Dude, that's so
caring
hard.
for the elderly is not a choice. It is a sacred responsibility. Children are taught, when grandparents can no longer walk, you must be their legs.
Dude.
When parents grow weak, you must be their shoulder to
That
lean
is
on.
incredibly.
And because of this, when Filipinos go out into the world to work, they are not just a workforce. They carry with them a tradition, an identity, a sacred vow.
They don't lose it
The
ever.
hero doesn't need superpowers, just a heart full of love and hands willing to touch another's wounds. The Filipinos every day do just that, quietly, humbly, but with all the respect for humanity. They don't have crowns of gold, but they have calloused hands from working tirelessly. They don't have grand, flowing capes, but they have eyes rimmed with dark circles from staying up all night beside hospital beds. And though they don't wear medals around their necks, they have thousands of silent thank yous from healed hearts. That is why, when King Charles III spoke his words of gratitude, the applause didn't just ring out for him, but because, at last, someone dared to call them by their true, deserving name, heroes. Filipinos
They
and
are.
Queen Elizabeth. Have you ever wondered? When one of the most powerful women in the world, Queen Elizabeth II, entered her final days, Who was there beside her?
Oh my God,
Not
yeah.
the generals, not the powerful courtiers, not even the most famous royal doctor, but the Filipino nurses. According to royal sources, in the last months of the Queen's life, the care team at Windsor included many staff members of Filipino descent, who not only cared for her, but also loved her as if she were their own grandmother.
Oh.
They did not appear in the news. No medals were awarded, no grand thank you ceremonies, but they were there right at the bedside whispering prayers with the Queen, holding her hand during cold nights, adjusting the blankets when no one was watching. A close source revealed the Queen didn't want too many people. She needed peace, and those Filipinos understood that.
Oh,
They were
bro.
present with quietness and gentleness,
That's just so
like a
beautiful,
warm breeze.
bro. The way they do
And
that.
more importantly, they truly cared. For weeks, they worked beyond their required hours. Not because of orders, not for the bonuses, but out of dedication, a trait deeply embedded in their blood.
And I think this is important to know too, because everyone's going to go, right? One day. And when you really think about that, I feel like this is why it makes me emotional, because it's like seeing how much care is given, because it's like they understand the power of like your last moments and being there wholeheartedly, not being there like half-assing it, not being there like, oh, let me just get this job over with. You're going to go anyways. They take it with all their heart, and they're like, okay, you are my family right now. And this is so important to note, because most people who are afraid or anything like that, it almost washes away all that fear. And it honestly is crazy to think about that. If we're all going to go one day, it's amazing, actually, not even just crazy, amazing to know that there's people like this, like Filipinos, who will absolutely make sure that you are a family. You are a loved one to them, no matter what. In that moment, in that hour, I feel like that is just crucial, bro. That stuff makes me want to cry, bro.
One nurse even slept on a folding chair, ready to wake up at any moment if the Queen needed her. Another carried a small rosary, whispering prayers in their native tongue, Amin, whenever the Queen felt pain. You may never hear their names. None of them made it to the newspapers. None were mentioned in historical records. But perhaps, if the Queen could say one last word, she would say, Salamat, because in the final moment of a great
Salamat.
life, what a person needs is
Salamat
not
po.
power, but tenderness. And no one understands that tenderness like Filipinos. For them, caring for the elderly is not a job, but a sacred duty. In the Philippines, we don't send our parents to nursing homes. We keep them in the house. We wash their feet when they are weak. We sing them to sleep when their memory fades. And they carried that tradition into Windsor Castle, not
bro.
to serve a monarchy, but to serve a grandmother.
This is why they're one of the
They
best,
didn't
bro.
get to take photos
I
with the
don't care
Queen's
what no one
coffin.
says.
They didn't sit in the honored seats at the national funeral, but they were there where there were no cameras, no media, no fame, where love was needed the most. And perhaps if you asked the Queen, who was there with you in your final days, she would smile with a gentle gaze and say, my Filipino grandchildren. The war in the dark, COVID-19. When the COVID-19 pandemic broke out,
Oh,
the world shut down.
yeah.
The streets were empty. Schools were silent. Churches, airports, restaurants came to a halt. But there was one place that could not stop. The hospital. And in those cold hospital corridors, every day, every hour, every minute, Filipinos stepped in, not to seek safety, but to fight. At a hospital in London, a Filipino nurse worked continuously for 18 hours a day, sleeping sitting on a plastic chair, her head resting on her hands, still wearing full protective gear. In Birmingham, a Filipino healthcare worker, though positive for the virus, refused to take time
Oh
off.
my goodness.
She feared that if she rested, the night shift would be understaffed and patients would die alone.
Yo, can I just say thank you? Anyone right now, right, who's doing this and maybe you're going through a hard time. I just want to let you know I appreciate you. Whoever you are, thank you for everything you do, everything you've done. I have a grandma who's actually passed, and I could only imagine it was probably a Filipino who took care of her too. I wasn't there when she did, but I was there before she did. And thank you. Thank you, all the healthcare workers, all of you working tirelessly, even if it's not even just healthcare, anything else, moving abroad, doing something like that, being away from the family to do something that you feel is important, something that is bigger than yourself. Thank you. Seriously. Thank you.
And one day in May 2020, the British press reported a 47-year-old Filipino nurse passed away from COVID-19 after 12 days in the hospital. She left behind 2 young children and a husband who also worked in healthcare. On the day of her death, her colleagues placed a small plaque in the break room. She didn't just work. She gave. She was not the only one. According to data from the UK's National Nurses Association, during the peak of the pandemic, over 70 Filipino nurses died in the UK.
Bro.
That number, while small in national statistics,
Rest in peace.
was a world to the families who could not yet bring their loved ones' ashes back home. The world was in panic. People were afraid to touch each other's hands, afraid of even a glance, afraid of contact. But the Filipinos, they touched.
Yeah.
They held the
I already
hands
know.
of dying patients.
They did it
They
anyways.
wiped the tears of strangers. They sang lullabies to the ones about to depart. And sometimes, they were the last ones beside a person about to leave this world. Not the doctor, not the family, but a Filipino nurse, whispering a prayer in the patient's ear. You are not alone. And they never complained. No complaints about policies. No demands for recognition. No social media posts about their struggles. They just kept going, day after day, night after night.
That's
Because for
incredible,
them, this is not just a job. This is a calling. So when King Charles III stood before hundreds of global health officials and said, "We couldn't do this without you," that was not a mere formality. That was an acknowledgement
Yeah, bro.
that in the deadliest battle of the 21st century, it was the Filipinos who were the quiet warriors holding Britain up. They didn't appear on television. They didn't get statues built in their honor. There was no national mourning, but they have something no one can take away. A kindness that made an entire nation bow its head in gratitude. A nation that cares with the heart. Have you ever wondered why Filipinos are called the best caregivers in the world? Not because they study at the most expensive medical schools. Not because they are skilled in technology or have advanced degrees. But because they carry with them a tradition, a belief, a way of life.
It's something in their heart,
In the
bro.
Philippines, caregiving is not just a responsibility. It is an identity. From a young age, a Filipino child is taught how to feed porridge to their grandfather when he is weak, how to massage their grandmother's feet after
Dude,
a
they're
long
taught to
day.
care. As a
And most
good person,
importantly,
bro.
when someone is in pain, you must be there. They grow up in multi-generational families living together. Grandparents, parents, children all under one roof. There are no nursing homes, no elderly abandoned. So, when they go out into the world to work, they don't just bring skills.
They bring
They
their
bring
life,
the
man.
heart of their homeland.
Oh, dude.
An English doctor once said, "When cared for by a Filipino nurse, I don't just feel better, I feel loved." And that love is not something romantic or fanciful. It is the patience to listen to a patient mumbling in pain. It is the gentleness when wiping tears from someone about to pass.
That's hard to
It
do
is the
too, man.
sacrifice of missing a sister's wedding, a child's birthday, or the final hug of a loved one he asked to continue the shift. And there's something else few mention. 86% of Filipinos are Catholic. For them, work is not just a means to earn a living. It is a way to live their faith. helping others, caring for the vulnerable, that is their mission. In the Bible, Jesus says, "What you do for the least of these, you do for me." Filipinos carry that message in every small action.
That's so
Helping
beautiful.
a patient rise from the bed, praying quietly by the bedside, hugging a stranger like they would their own mother. At a hospital in Glasgow, a Filipino nurse voluntarily stayed after her shift, just to sit beside an elderly man who had no relatives. She said nothing. She simply held his hand and sang a lullaby gently in Tagalog. The man passed away in his sleep, not alone, not cold, but in the arms of an angel with a Filipino nationality. Filipinos don't wear holy white coats. They don't have halos, but they have a gentle light that radiates from resilient kindness. They don't need others to call them heroes. They just need to believe that kindness still matters in
They
this
do
world.
it through action, not through
And
words.
when King
man.
Charles III says, "You don't just work with your hands,
Yeah.
you work with your heart," he's not just talking about skills. He's talking about a soul, a nation, a way of life. The king speaks for US. There are times in life when all we want is for someone to speak up for us. Not to boast, not to demand rights, but simply to be seen. And on that day, in a magnificent hall, before hundreds of international delegates, King Charles III did just
Recognize
that.
it, yeah.
He didn't
Recognize
deliver
everything.
an impersonal speech. He interrupted the prepared speech. He looked directly at the Filipinos.
Yeah, he didn't even have to, but
And he said what millions had been waiting for decades to hear. "We couldn't do this without you." It wasn't a diplomatic thank you. It was an acknowledgement. A confirmation that Filipinos are no longer the invisible workforce behind the system. They are part of the backbone of society. A journalist at the event wrote in their report, "I've never seen so many people wiping away tears at an international conference." A Filipino doctor shared on social media, "I've worked in the UK for 18 years.
oh my goodness.
This is the first time I feel like I belong here." Because sometimes, just one sentence from the right person
Yeah.
in the right place at the right time can heal a history of silence. Filipinos have lived in dedication. They have sacrificed without expecting anything in return. They have loved without seeking attention. And now, a king, the head of the oldest monarchy in Europe, has spoken on behalf of the world. History will not remember all the names of the caregivers. It will not record every hug, every prayer,
Yeah.
every night shift. But just one moment like this, a word of gratitude from the pinnacle of royalty, is enough for an entire community to feel respected. And from that moment, the story is no longer just about the UK. It spreads across the world. To the US, where thousands of Filipino nurses work on the front lines.
Yeah.
To Italy, where Filipino caregivers care for the elderly, as if they were their own family. To Canada, Japan, Saudi Arabia. Wherever there are Filipinos, there is a deep sense of emotion at those words. "We see you. We appreciate you."
Yeah.
That is not just the king's words. That is the heartfelt voice of millions of patients who are loved, without having the chance to say thank you. What should we do next? A single sentence from the king cannot erase the silent sacrifices of millions. It cannot bring back missed birthdays. It cannot fill the distance between mothers working night shifts in London and children growing up across the seas in Manila. But it can be a beginning for a world that listens more. A world that sees the people not in the spotlight, but standing in the hospital corridors, in the kitchens,
Yeah.
in the intensive care units where life and humanity are most real.
Yeah.
You're watching this video. Maybe you're a Filipino working far from home. Maybe you're someone cared for by a Filipino nurse. Or maybe you're simply someone who has been moved by kindness. So ask yourself, what can I do to honor them? Not just with words, but with actions. Maybe it's a thank you, a hug, a message for the mother, the wife, the brother, the friend working the night shift abroad.
Yeah.
Maybe it's sharing this story so that those who have never heard it can begin to feel it. Because all great changes always start with small recognitions. We don't need to be kings to say thank you. We just need to be human and to still value each other.
I think the emotion mainly comes from the idea that they essentially remove themselves from their family and they take on a life that is bigger than themselves, like I was mentioning before, something bigger than themselves, and to just honestly persevere through it all, still contribute to society in such an insanely incredible way, and still be intact with your heart and your soul. You don't lose that. You stay with that throughout all of this, throughout something that most people wouldn't be able to handle. This is what Filipinos are capable of, bro. And I feel like every time I talk about it, it makes me emotional because I could only imagine what that's like. Only imagine what that's like. That's like one of the hardest things to ever do. And it's just consistently done by Filipinos. No matter what, typhoons in their country, being far away from family, passings, everything, and they still hold on to their heart. They still take care of other people. They never let these problems get to them. It's just like incredible. It's this moving forward aspect, but they don't only just move forward and become numb. They move forward and keep their heart and soul. That's unbelievable. I don't care what no one says. Thank you guys for everything. And thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. Hey, if you liked it, leave a like. If you loved it, subscribe. If you want more, let me know down in the comments below. And yeah, till next time, guys. Peace.
Look. How good you been living? Wait, how good you been living? I've been living too good for you. I've been living too. Did what I did and I do it again. Every move that I make, I ain't feeling repent. Nobody believes to believe it's a friend, and you question your moves like you really won't end. Really?